what is it? Devil's Wednesday? Oh, I'm not used to this. Oh, man, it's a solo show on the State of the Fan Address. Early edition, 7 p.m. start. The Stanley Cup Finals start tonight. The Stanley Cup Final. No S, folks. There's no S because they want to make it harder than us as the NHL. I'm Nick Villano, editor-in-chief of pucksandpitchforks.com. So excited to have everybody here for a very special podcast tonight. We have two great guests tonight. We have Corey Schneider. No, not that Corey Schneider, but arguably an even better Corey Schneider at Shutdown Line on Twitter. And then we have Lyle Richardson, Spectors Hockey, Bleacher Report. He's been on Sporting News, Sports Illustrated, the whole kit and caboodle, one of the great writers of our generation. He's coming on later tonight. We got so much to talk about, folks. It is speculation season. It's my favorite season. It's also Crazy's Town season. You're seeing all kinds of crazy trade proposals from non-Devils fans trying to get our best players and prospects. I've seen people say, we got to give up Nico Hischier. We got to give up Alex Holtz. We got to give up Dawson Mercer. We got to, and this is on top of the second overall pick. So it's Crazy Town season, folks, and I love it. I love seeing Montreal Canadiens fans thinking that they're going to get the second overall pick for Josh frickin' Anderson. I love seeing the Vancouver Canucks fans coming with Brock Besser gets you the second overall pick. No, it does not, folks. It does not. But these people they're out here. They're thinking that this second overall pick, this is my favorite trope, is that, well, the second overall pick doesn't have as much value this year as it does next year. Okay, great. But there's zero chance you get next year's second overall pick. There's no player in this league. People wouldn't trade next year's second overall pick for Connor McDavid. I will go out on a limb and say the two players at the top of the next draft are supposed to be the next Connor McDavid anyway. Nobody is trading those picks. You're not getting those picks. Teams are afraid to trade 2023 first-round picks because, God forbid, they lose out on the chance to get players of that caliber. So, correct. You are not getting next year's second overall pick. It doesn't have that much value, but that is an impossible value. This year's second overall pick is available, and picks like this are never available. And this is an interesting one because you get the pick of the litter for some of the top names in this draft. You can do you need a defenseman? Because Simon Nemec is amazing. He's so good, and he's right-handed, which is so much more valuable in today's NHL. You want a guy with a little more oomph. Jiricek is really good, and he's also right-handed. He's another defenseman. Do you need a center? Logan Cooley is phenomenal. He's so good. People think that he might become the best player in this draft. And then obviously there's Juraj Slavkovsky, the Slovak, who's just been crushing it on the international stage. Did so well in the Olympics a couple months ago, and then really shelled out in the World Championships a couple weeks ago or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was. He has been phenomenal. You kind of get the pick of the litter there. So this pick has a ton of value. Now, I know it's kind of like the straw man's argument that, if there's a lot of players that are worth the second overall pick, nobody's worth the second overall pick, because if there's a lockdown guy like Capo Caco, Jack Eichel, whoever else you want to, the Tyler Sagans of the world, if there's a guy like that, then, the immense value you wouldn't have a question about who the second overall pick is, but that's not really how it works. Then there's the wild card. Here's the wild card about all of this is the Shane Wright factor. Everything I'm hearing is that the Canadiens are going to take Shane Wright, but there just keeps being a but. There's always a but. They're always like, well, I mean, they really like Slavkovsky, but they're gonna take Shane Wright, right? They'd love to get both picks because they really like Slavkovsky. You have a few weeks now until the NHL draft, and that's a few weeks of talking yourself into that pick. And I think that I honest to goodness think that's what happened when Ray Shero ended up picking Nico Hischier. He talked himself into that pick. It was the right pick. Obviously, you'd love to have Cale Makar right now, but at the time, Makar was not. He was an outside choice. He was the Cutter Gauthier of that draft. You're going to take Cale Makar first overall? That's insanity. I remember those conversations, and obviously it would have been the right pick now, but I love having Nico Hischier on the team, especially with when you see the growth of Pavel Zacha and Michael McLeod and see what role they're now in as centers on this team. You really needed to make that Nico Hischier pick. And you ended up getting Dougie Hamilton, who's great at that position. You still have Damon Severson, so you're pretty stacked on the right side anyway. Don't get me wrong. Would have loved to have Cale Makar, best defenseman in the league right now. Him and Hedman are kind of head-to-head, which is great because you get that head-to-head matchup in the Stanley Cup final. But it's just funny how these things get valued now. But let's talk about some of the players that are being mentioned real quick because we're going to get Corey on in about 2 minutes. We're getting Corey on in a couple minutes. But Matthew Tkachuk, it seems like that chatter's gone away. I don't think that he's as available as we thought he might be. Or maybe it's just gotten quiet because the Flames aren't kind of front and center right now. But I think they're going to find a way to make it work with both Johnny Hockey and Matthew Tkachuk. I think they're just going to figure it out. They do have a decent amount of cap space, about the same amount as the Devils. So maybe they make it work. Kevin Fiala is a player that's been brought up. I just don't think the value is second overall pick. I just don't. I had somebody come into my inbox today and say, which one of Alexander Holtz or Dawson Mercer would you trade straight up? And I was like, neither. That's just not the value for Kevin Fiala right now. Not for the situation. Nobody wants to be the guy who, Minnesota is in a bad way, and they need somebody to come bail them out. I don't think anybody's going to do that while also giving them, whether you want to call it fair market value or whatever. I don't think there's going to be a bidding war for Kevin Fiala. I think everybody's going to mostly stand pat on the valuation of him and just make Minnesota pick. So I don't think that that's I don't think that that's how that's going to work out. I think that Kevin Fiala is going to come in. I actually think the Devils could trade the second overall pick and also get Kevin Fiala in a different trade. So that'll be interesting. The name that everybody's kind of circling now is David Pastrnak. So I don't know what's happening in Boston. They don't have a coach yet. I think that's going to really show you what they're going to do with Pastrnak is who they hire as a coach. If they hire a Gerard Gallant type, I think they're doing that to try to repair that relationship because that's just an asset you don't want to lose. But when you look at like who's available and who teams will make available, I look at it and I only think that the Kings are a team that could compete with an offer of what the Devils could propose to Boston. The Kings have just prospects that are so close to NHL rating, could be so good. They'd probably give up Quentin Byfield in a David Pastrnak trade. And I don't know. Yeah, that I feel like him and Cooley are kind of like this. They're completely different players. But when it comes to value, I think they're just kind of close with what they can do. So, but looks like we got Corey Schneider in the green room. Corey, why don't we let Corey on? Corey, can you hear me?
Hey guys, how's it going? Yeah, I can hear you.
Hey Corey, it's a little weird. I've never done the guest thing with a solo show, so I didn't know how to introduce you. So sorry about that, Corey. But Corey Schneider, writer at McKean's Hockey at Shutdown Line. You know him on Twitter. You've seen some of his analytics. He's one of the better ones out there. But Corey, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's been a while.
So it has been a while. We wanted to get you on last week. Obviously, we had a little situation that we had to figure out, but all good. We got you on now, and we have a lot to talk about. First, I did hear you got the illustrious mention from Elliot Friedman of 32 Thoughts podcast. What was that like? What was it like? Did people come in your mention to let you know, or how did you find out that you were getting the big mention on the hockey pod?
Somebody actually let me know on Twitter. He was like, he was like, "Hey, Elliot Friedman just mentioned you on 32 Thoughts the podcast. Like, he's mentioned me in his articles a few times, and he's never like given me a shout out on the podcast before, so that was pretty cool. It's always fun because like my fiance always like makes a big deal out of it because she listens to the podcast all the time.
That's why I heard it, and it's always funny when I hear kind of people we've had on our podcast get mentioned on other podcasts or go on bigger podcasts. I'm like, oh, I knew you when kind of thing. So that's always fun to see. But let's talk. Super deserving. But let's talk about Devils hockey. There's just a lot going on. I want to talk about the season real quick. I know it's been a couple weeks and we're in the Stanley Cup final, so a lot of focus has been all the teams in the playoffs. But I do want to focus real quick on the Devils season because it kind of what you think of this team might dictate how they go forward with this offseason. Now, there was a lot of criticism of the win-o-meter and kind of all that other stuff and how the Devils always were an analytical darling and they looked like they should win every night and then they just never won. And a lot of that has been attributed to having Andrew Hammond and John Gillies in goal. But when you kind of look at the numbers, when you crunch the numbers, is that what you're seeing? Is this team literally just a goalie away from being competitive?
I would say yes, like being competitive, absolutely, because you're talking about competing for a playoff spot and getting to being with the Washingtons and the Carolinas of the division, even the Rangers. Because, like, speaking as like somebody that's followed the Hurricanes closely for the past decade, they were pretty much almost the same team as the Devils for a long time. And they were trotting out Cam Ward year after year. And then they tried Scott Darling one year and it didn't work. And they did a lot of things right process-wise. Like they would outplay teams at the beginning of games. But the second they give up a medium danger chance, it went in. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, crap, we got to play from behind now. We got to start pressing. We got to start getting out of our structure a little bit. And that just kind of ruins your whole game plan, especially when you don't have like elite finishing talent, which the Hurricanes did for years. And the Devils are starting to get there. Like Jack Hughes absolutely arrived last year. Yes, Jesper Bratt had a really good season too. So they're starting to get there. I think, like as far as being a competitive team, yeah, just having a goalie that isn't posting like negative 900 save percentages every night, that's going to go a long way because that's basically what happened with Carolina. They get Peter Mrazek and Curtis McElhaney for a year, and all of a sudden they're in the playoffs. Like they were an 8 seed, granted, but it kind of started skyrocketing their play a little bit. It started to become easier to figure out where the holes in their game are, play a little more of what they wanted to, just because they weren't playing from behind every night, and it goes a long way.
Yeah, and honestly, like I kind of saw that in the Devils a little bit, where they were just kind of like everybody's like, "Well, the defense was so terrible." I was like, actually, they really weren't. Like I was surprised at this, but they were, I think, 6th in the league in high danger chances allowed. But when your goalie can't stop a medium danger chance, you're kind of in a position where you see, maybe you're just kind of a little lackluster. Maybe it's like, when you're putting up all this effort, maybe it kind of gets in your head. Do you kind of see that as a possibility? Like you said, with Carolina back in the day?
Yeah, like I was watching it. I watched a few Devils games the last couple of weeks just as a refresher because it's like been a while since I've watched teams that like aren't in the playoffs. But
oh man,
just from what I saw, it's yeah. But like going by what I saw, it's like their system and their process is pretty good, but whenever something just falls out of line, it's just kind of a domino effect. Like I think I was watching a game against I can't remember who it was exactly, but they had a puck that didn't get out of the zone, and then let's say it turned into 2 or 3 turnovers, and then they're fishing the puck out of the back of the net. I think it was against the Oilers actually. But there is sort of like a domino or an avalanche effect with them where it's like if they have a guy that is posted up at the blue line to stop a zone entry, if he gets beaten, it's usually going to be a scoring chance or a goal. So I think there is kind of like a high risk nature to their game just because they're a team that creates so much on the rush, which means you've got to have your forwards back checking at the same rate of speed that they're coming out of that they're entering the zone with. And sometimes it's tough on your defense to do that all the time. It's tough on your defense to stand up at the blue line. It's also tough to have them. It's like if they don't really read the play in front of them correctly, it's kind of hard for them to sit back and guess where the puck is going, guess if a pass is coming, or if the forward's going to be driving the net. I've noticed a few of their defensemen struggle with that, especially Ty Smith. So there is some things that I think they can clean up, mostly with just how they defend off the rush, because it's like, as far as giving up chances goes, they're okay. They're like in the middle of the pack, maybe one of the better teams on the whole. But when they give up the blue line, they're in the bottom half of the league in terms of giving up scoring chances. So it's like a high risk reward thing. But I think that also kind of comes back to the goaltending too, because like everything looks worse when like one out of like 6 chances you give up is gonna beat you.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And I kind of want to dig a little bit deeper in that, because you're big on zone entries and zone exits. The Devils are one of the best teams in the league in zone entries. Jack Hughes is a zone entry phenom. He gets in the zone constantly. But when you look at the other side, the Devils statistically, I think at one point last season, they were like by far the worst when it came to allowing zone entries to the other team. I don't know if that evened out at all, but I highly doubt it. Are you big on focusing on your flaws? So the Devils obviously would need some size to make people pay for coming into the zone, or do you think it's a fool's bet to like prioritize grit over skill?
I think it's the nature of the games they're playing, just because they're very high paced. And I mean, I think some of their defensemen are actually a little like on kind of the slower side. Like Graves isn't really the best skater, and he's somebody that really likes to challenge at the blue line. So it's kind of like either he makes the right read and makes the right play, or he doesn't and ends up being a goal. So it's like they have it's very feast or famine with how they defend. I think maybe they could stand to be a little more like conservative with how they defend the blue line a little bit. Maybe have guys standing back, just because the defense as a whole, I feel like, aren't great skaters. It's not like they're slow or anything, but I think they have a good mix. It's just some guys on the bottom of the roster get burned really badly. Like, I don't want to pick on Ty Smith, but he was by far the biggest culprit of fire drills that happen in their own zone when I was reviewing a lot of their games. But that's also kind of the nature of how Dougie Hamilton plays too, just watching him in Carolina, because he's either going to negate the play or it's going to be a disaster. And more times than not, he's very good at shutting plays down before they even get into the zone. But if it gets into the zone, he kind of has trouble like retrieving the puck and making the next play up the board. But that also comes back to the forwards too, because I've noticed a lot of their forwards, they're not exactly in the right place when it comes to breakouts. But that's also kind of just what happens when you're playing like fire wagon hockey like they do. So like I said, like a lot of things need to be cleaned up. I don't really think it's like prioritizing a skill, prioritizing grit over skill or anything like that. I just think it's just the type of games they're in are very high paced, and it's tough for a lot of defensemen to kind of keep up with that if they're not like the fastest skaters in the world.
So you brought up Ty Smith now twice. So I have to ask, I'm going off the board a little bit with this, but is he salvageable, or is this, has too much happened to him this year?
I don't know what happened to him between like 2021 and like this offseason, because he looked like a promising player around this time last year. But I think they're better off just trading him, because like I just look at the group of six they have now, because like you have Hamilton, you have Siegenthaler, Graves, and obviously like Luke Hughes is going to come in too. I think they're better off just working him in rather than trying to salvage something out of Ty Smith. I think they might be better at trading him, see if a fresh start somewhere else gets them somewhere, just because, like, I don't know, he just seems like he's in his own head a bit, just with some of the mistakes he was making.
Yeah, I think I'm leaning towards that too, just because it just, the same thing happened to him a couple years ago in the preseason, and they had to send him all the way back to junior when they thought he was going to make the NHL. And that did work, but he was playing against much lesser competition. There's nowhere else to send him now. He's not even AHL eligible next year. He'd have to go through waivers. So it's definitely a rough situation for Tom Fitzgerald. I'll tell you that much. Now, another rough situation for Tom Fitzgerald is what to do with the second overall draft pick. That's the big story. What are they going to do with this pick? Are they going to trade it for an absolute superstar? Are they going to select somebody who they think is an absolute superstar? So let me ask you, put yourself in the Devils' shoes. Made the playoffs once in the past decade, and it was a 5-game exit to the Tampa Bay Lightning. Are you still building, knowing that you could get a Yurov Slavkovsky, a Logan Cooley, or a Simone Nemec, or are you dangling it for Kevin Fiala, or maybe an even bigger trade? You probably have to add if you do David Pastrnak, but they have the pieces to add. Corey, what are you doing if you're the Devils with the second overall pick?
I mean, more times than not, I'm keeping the pick just because like, aside from Hughes, Nico, and Bratt, like I think they need more high end talent up front, but I also don't think you need to give up the second overall pick to get a Kevin Fiala or even a David Pastrnak, because he's got 1 year. He only has 1 year left on his contract, and I feel like you might be able to get him for not a top 3 pick. But it's also, I don't know, the last 2 years have made the draft so weird because I don't really know if we know anything about these players coming out, just with how broken, fragmented, like junior hockey, college hockey has been over the past couple of years. So I'm a little more open to trading that pick this year than previous years. But I just don't think it's going to take a top 2 pick, especially to get Kevin Fiala, because like Kevin Fiala could slide into their top line and get you like 80 points in his sleep. And I don't think you need to give up a top 2 pick for him because it seems like the Wild don't even want him.
Which is weird.
Judging from reports. Yeah, I know. I don't get it either, but every report I've seen is like been just get this guy out of here, like because he doesn't fit like our makeup or something like that. But I also know they have some cap issues coming up, so I don't really know what's going on there. But I think you can get a Kevin Fiala without giving up a top 2 pick, just in my opinion.
Hey, I'm here for it. That would be an exciting a move. Corey, before I let you go, kind of let everybody know where they can find your work, what you've been working on, maybe where they can find some of your draft stuff. What you got coming up?
Well, you can go to my website, all3zones.com, and right there is your home for finding a subscription to getting my statistics. Whole bunch of microstats in the league, shot assists, zone entries, zone exits, a lot of detailed under the hood stats. And you can find my Twitter on Shutdown Line, and that's the general hub for most of what I do. If I have a new post coming up on my Substack or on McKean's Hockey or anything like that, that's pretty much where you're going to find it.
Awesome, and we'll share some of that on the Pucks and Pitchforks Twitter account too. That's where you can find a lot of our great guest stuff. But Corey, we'll probably have you on after the Devils make a bunch of moves that we don't agree with, and we'll have you speak sweet nothings to us to tell us it's all going to be okay and we're going to be good one day. But Corey Schneider, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And that was Corey Schneider of McKean's Hockey at Shutdown Line. Let me get his website right. I want to say the right one. It's all3zones.com. Make sure you go to all3zones.com to see some of his statistics, some of his analytics. Corey Schneider has been doing this a long time, and he doesn't get the publicity that some of the other ones that I've seen, but he deserves it. He's one of the best in the world at hockey analytics. So if you're not following Shutdown Line, you're doing yourself a disservice. Go follow Shutdown Line. Go subscribe. Go support him on Patreon. Go check out everything that Corey Schneider is doing because he's he's phenomenal at what he does. And he talks about every team. He leans a little towards Carolina because it's his favorite team. Like who could blame him? But he definitely gives everybody the right amount of play, and he'll analyze free agent signings as they happen, draft picks, things like that. So perfect follow. Coming up, we got Lyle Richardson coming on. I'm excited to talk to him. He's been writing a lot of Devils. I've been checking out his Bleacher Report stuff. He has been writing a lot of Devils, and that's because he's a speculation guy. I love a speculation guy. And my guy, Lyle Richardson, is a speculation guy. And he's been he's been looking at a lot of stuff of what's going to happen next year. A lot of who's going to be good next year, a lot of which teams are going to add this offseason, a lot of where, some dark horse picks for free agent signings and maybe some trade pieces. He's been writing, if you like some of the stuff at pucksandpitchforks.com, you'll love Lyle Richardson because he writes a lot of that speculation stuff that does really well on our website. So he's got to be making a killing right now. We love to see it. But we're so excited to have Lyle on, and honestly, but before we have Lyle on, I do want to just mention some of the things that Corey said. The one thing that I need to talk about is the Ty Smith thing, and I'm going to write an article about this. I'm going to try to get it up tomorrow morning. I don't know what you do with Ty Smith. I think you got to trade him. I think Corey's right there. Say he turns it around and he plays really well. Where do you even put him? Are you going to put Ryan Graves on the third line? Like, say the Damon Severson, Ty Smith thing clicks again like it did 2 years ago or 2 seasons ago. Say it all works out. What do you do now? Like, you're not going to put Siegenthaler, unless Siegenthaler falls off a cliff. Because there's always that possibility that a player will fall off a cliff. But the way Siegenthaler plays the game seems sustainable. What do you do with Ty Smith? I think you have to trade him. I do. I don't know if it's, because, again, he mentioned Luke Hughes is here next season. Not next season as in 2022-23. Next season is 23-24. So you go one more season where you have a left-handed defenseman that you need a spot. You have Kevin Ball. You have Nikita Hoytuk. You have, Vukovic. You have a couple other left-handed defensemen. You got Shakir Mukhamadullin, who I don't think he's ready to play in the NHL, but who knows? Maybe he adds 20 pounds of muscle over the summer. I don't know. There's a lot that could happen, but I think that with Ty Smith, the only there's no way you can do this without it being a trade. This is weird. I'm going to say this is weird doing this solo because I never know when guests are on because I don't have Sam popping up next to me to be like, oh, Sam's back. There's no Sam's back here. So I'm kind of like waiting here. Like, oh, do we have the guest? I don't want them to wait too long, but he's not here yet. So we're working on Lyle. We're getting him on. I'm excited to talk to him just because there's just so much going on. I've never seen a Devils offseason with more speculation. I mean, obviously, it has a lot to do with the fact that Tom Fitzgerald made it clear that he wants to make the first-round pick available when it was a 5th or 6th round overall pick. And then Elliot Friedman reported that it's still available with 2nd overall. That provides a bevy of possibilities for you as a franchise. And we get to write about it. We get to talk about it on the podcast. But there's more than that. There's the Jesper Bratt contract, which, there was reports out there that it was done. Off the record, I was told it was done too. Besides a few crossing T's, dotting I's, but it looks like it's not done. So I think it's done. I honestly think it's done. I think it's done. Like, I think the money's done. I think there's some things that you have to add. Some, like, how intense of a no move clause are you allowed to have? How, there's all these incentives. These contracts are pretty large, so there's a lot to do. But looks like we got Lyle Richardson on the line. Sam, patch him in. Lyle, can you hear me?
I sure can. Can you hear me?
I got you, Lyle Richardson. Thank you so much for coming on the Let's Go Devils podcast again. I'm so excited. You keep writing about the Devils. I'm like, when's it too early to ask him to come on again? Because he wrote about the Devils again. You've been writing a lot. I mean, you write about a lot of teams, but you know, you've been leaning towards the Devils, haven't you?
Well, the Devils are a very interesting team. You know, they've been building up for about the last 2 or 3 years, as you all know, and you know, there's a little bit of excitement about them heading into the draft because you know, General Manager Tom Fitzgerald has indicated that he's willing to move that second overall pick if he can get an impact player that can help the team right away become a contender. So yeah, there's some understandable increase in interest in the Devils of late.
Now, you wrote on Bleacher Report about like teams that should consider trading that first round pick, and usually that article would have maybe some of the later teams, maybe some of the teams in the middle, but usually that does not have the team with the second overall pick making that trade. But you said that they should make that move. What makes you say that? You know, there's a lot of speculation whether they should take like a Slavkovsky or maybe even a Cooley or a Nemec, but you're saying that they should make that move. What makes you lean towards that?
Well, I go back to what Fitzgerald, you know, what he said in his end of season press conference. And as you recall, I mean, this past season there was a lot of anticipation that Devils were going to be a better team, that they were going to be hopefully contending, and they got off to a good start, and then everything just kind of fell apart. And so the season ultimately ended in disappointment, and Fitzgerald was basically saying, okay, no more excuses. We've been riding this thing of we're a young team, a younger team, we're building up with youth, but he's saying like the time is now, sort of thing. It's like no more of this, you know, using youth as an excuse or inexperience as an excuse. It's time now. And again, coupled with the fact that as I said earlier, that he's willing to listen to offers for that pick if it'll bring him an impact player. I think that he's right. The time is now. They've been rebuilding for a while, and they have you know, a couple of issues they still need to address that need a more immediate fix. Whether it's in goal or whether it's finding that winger who can either skate alongside Sznajder or Jack Hughes. That, you know, I'm talking a genuine bona fide scoring winger. One of those two it's going to be worth moving that pick if it will fetch you that return that's going to help you contend starting next season.
Do you have like a bottom dollar return that in mind? Like who's a player who you would be satisfied with if they made that trade?
Well, it's interesting. There's one guy who immediately springs to mind, and that's Alex DeBrincat from the Chicago Blackhawks. You know, in the last couple of weeks, I mean, his name has certainly come out there in the trade market, and I think that's the type of impact player that you move that pick for. This is a guy who's hit 40 goals twice in his career. I think that he would be a terrific fit alongside either Sznajder or Jack Hughes. He's certainly young enough that he would certainly fit into that core of young talent that the Devils have. That's a guy I think I think that Tom Fitzgerald would consider an impact player. That's the type of player that you would move that second overall pick for. You're not bringing in a guy that's 30 years old. You're not bringing in a guy who's 28 years old. You're bringing in somebody who I believe is 24, if I'm you know, remembering here correctly. So, you know, again, as I said, he would fit very well into that young core of talent that the Devils have. So, yeah, I think that's the type of guy that you give that pick up for.
Lyle, I've had a couple people come in my mentions and my DMs from the Minnesota side of things because the Devils and the Wild have been tied for what seems like a couple weeks on this Kevin Fiala deal. Bill Guerin came out and basically said he doesn't want Kevin Fiala, so that was weird. The whole situation seems a little weird in Minnesota in general with the buyouts and now we're having all this dead cap. So but I can't find a trade for Kevin Fiala that makes both sides happy. Is there a fit here? Do you see them making sense as trade partners?
Well, I wouldn't rule it out, but I'll say this right off the top: you don't give up the second overall pick for Kevin Fiala. Let's get that out of the way right now. I know Fiala's 25, but I have not seen enough consistency out of him. If not like DeBrincat. DeBrincat is a proven 40-goal scorer. We know this. Okay. Fiala, yeah, he had he exceeded 80 points. I think it was like a point per game pace that he was on this season. I think it was 84 points or something, 85 points he finished with. But that's the first time he's ever hit numbers that high. And my question going into that is this actual genuine proof that this guy has broken out big time as a scorer, or was this an anomaly? I'm not saying that he's a terrible player, but if you look back over his career, has he? He's always been sort of like that second line guy, and he was a second line guy, with Minnesota. So, I'm not saying that maybe you shouldn't look at it, but the one factor that worries me there is he's a restricted free agent with arbitration rights this summer. He's probably going to be looking at between $7 and $8 million. I don't think he's the type of guy you want to spend that kind of money on if you're the Devils, to be honest. Again, I go back to DeBrincat with Chicago. I think he's definitely a guy who's worth investing that kind of money in. But Fiala, I'm still not convinced. I need to see another season of him to see if what he did this season was for real, or if this was just a one-off and he goes back to being a 20-goal, 50-point guy. Not there's anything wrong with that, and maybe you could swing a deal that you could bring him in for definitely as long as it doesn't cost you something worthwhile, like a second overall pick.
Let me ask you this, because you brought up just the money of it all, and this is kind of it reminds me of the Jesper Bratt situation, and kind of how you pay him in a contract and what you do with him. It's a very similar situation. A guy who's been a second-line guy his entire career, really good, but, never great. And then this year, boom, out of nowhere in his contract year, is a point-per-game player. Do you see a similarity between those two? And do you think the fact that they have to pay Jesper Bratt might make them not want to take two risks on a guy who's going to make more than $6 million right after his breakout season?
Yeah. Well, with Bratt, you know what you've got. Okay, because you guys, you followed him, and I'm not just saying like, you guys, as Devils fans or as bloggers or what have you, but I mean, I'm talking now Devils management, the coaching staff, so on. You've had this guy for several years. He's developed along slowly, but you've seen the improvement each year. There was always the promise and the potential, and then he really burst out this season. Was definitely, I think, the brightest spot, the brightest story for the Devils this season was his performance. And, I think you would know by this point for him if that's for real, okay? Or if this, is just an anomaly. And I don't think that is. I don't think that that Fitzgerald is approaching this with the feeling that, he had a great year, but there's still weaknesses in his game or whatever. This isn't like Fiala. This isn't like somebody else's guy like Fiala is with Minnesota. You haven't seen him enough. You don't know how he interacts in the room. You don't know what his training habits are, blah, 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 blah. Whereas with Jesper Bratt, you know what you've got. You know what he does. And again, I go back to what Fitzgerald was saying. In fact, I think it was just, a week and a half ago. He was confirming, oh yes, we want to get him under contract because we see him being part of our long-term future. And when I hear that, I think, yeah, they're looking at locking this guy up for 6, 7, 8 years, and hopefully try and get it at a rate that's going to be sort of team friendly over the course of the deal. You know what I mean? So I definitely think they're going to pay quite a bit for him. I don't see this being another short term deal for him. And yeah, if you could be looking at around between 6 to 8 years and maybe something in the $7 million range per season. And if this season was his actual breakout and he's going forward, then 7 to 7.5 mil over the long term, that'll turn out to be a bargain over the course of the deal if he keeps playing the way that he did this season.
Yeah. Listen, if you get a point per game, I'll give you $7 million. You know what I'm saying? I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
So one player that hasn't really earned his respect and admiration of the Devils fan base is Pavel Zacha, former 6th overall pick. Everybody knows. Massive, stacked draft, stars abound. Matthew Barzal, Mikko Rantanen, a bunch of other. Zach Werenski went after Pavel Zacha. The Devils had a chance to do something really great in 2015, and they didn't. They got Pavel Zacha, who's still an NHL player, but he comes with a lot of, I don't know if you want to call it baggage or there's a lot of buts when it comes to his game. But he's still, I mean, he's got all the tools. Just doesn't seem like they come out on the ice. Is this a guy who you think just needs a change of scenery? Do you see him thriving with an Oilers, with the Kings, with Canadians, or do you think it makes sense or Vancouver was tied to him? Do you think it makes sense for him that he can maybe finally hit his potential if he finds a new home?
I certainly wouldn't rule that out. I think he's a guy who I think it may be time, as you said, for a change of scenery. There's no guarantees, obviously. I mean, he could go on to any one of those teams that you just rattled off, or any other team in the league for that matter, and just be the same player that he's always been in New Jersey. And then we know, okay, he is what he is. On we go. But I think that maybe that sometimes. Yeah, a player just needs to go to just a different environment or whatever, just to help bring out that potential that was always there. And I mean, he's not old. I mean, he's still early going into mid-20s, and there's still some room there for him to improve and find his game. I mean, we always know that in NHL history, there's always been some players who are slow to develop in their early 20s, and then they go on and they blossom elsewhere in their late 20s, or sometimes a change of scenery works. I mean, you look at Sam Bennett. There was so much expectation for him in Calgary, and he did so many different roles, and he always came alive for them in the playoffs, but he always seemed to leave you wanting more in the regular season. Then he goes down to Florida, and he's has his best season ever. So, that could happen with Zacha. But, I could see him being perhaps part of a larger deal, maybe a trade chip to bring in, maybe help bring in that impact player that Fitzgerald was talking about. I wouldn't rule that out.
So, Lyle, before we let you go, we just a couple minutes until the end, but tell me, is there something bold? You've been making a lot of bold predictions. Is there something bold you think the Devils are going to do this season? Do you think this is all just smoke and it never turns into anything? Or do you think the Devils are actually going to make something bold? Do you have a bold prediction for the Devils offseason?
My bold prediction is they'll do something bold. I really, honestly, I think they're good. I think they're going to be in on DeBrincat. The fact that the Blackhawks are willing to listen on him, the only thing that could be a sticking point with him is he's a year away from being a restricted free agent again with arbitration rights, but by that point he'll also be a year away from unrestricted free agent eligibility. In other words, you'd only have him for 2 more years. You know what I mean? His rights for 2 more years. So if you're going to go after this guy, you better make damn sure that you can get him under contract long term. Because if not, it could really blow up, say, in the Devils' face if Fitzgerald was to give up. Let's say, for argument's sake, he gave up the second overall pick, and maybe something else, maybe Zacha. But let's say he did that, gave up the second overall pick in Zacha for DeBrincat. DeBrincat comes in and he's only there for 2 years and then he's gone. And meanwhile, Zacha is playing great in Chicago, and they use that second overall pick to bring in Slavkovsky or Logan Cooley or maybe Shane Wright if the Canadians don't pick him, and they go off great, and then you're sitting there looking silly. But I do think that Fitzgerald really, really, really wants to bring in another impact player. I mean, listen, he surprised us all when he got Dougie Hamilton last summer. That was an eyebrow raiser for everybody. So I would not rule out at all the possibility that he goes after an impact forward. I would say he could maybe surprise us and maybe go after a goaltender, but right now in the goalie market, in the trade market and in the free agent market, there's really not a lot there for goaltenders. So I don't think that's where the big splash comes from. I think the big move is for that impact forward.
Lyle Richardson, Spectres Hockey, Bleacher Report. You have bylines everywhere. Let everybody know where they can find your work, and let everybody know what you're working on now.
Well, yeah, you can, as you mentioned, you can find me at Bleacher Report. I also do a daily rumor column for the Hockey News. I also have my own website, spectreshockey.net. And if you read German, I have a weekly column in Ice Hockey News in Germany. And currently, right now, I am working on my mock draft for Bleacher Report. And no spoilers. Sorry, you'll have to wait until it comes out.
No spoilers, but
let me put it this way. I will let you know if Fitzgerald keeps the second overall pick, it's Slavkovsky.
Oh, we got a spoiler, folks.
So there you go. There's your spoiler.
Special.
There's your spoiler.
No, that's exciting.
Which, to be honest, if you look at most other mock drafts, mine's pretty much in line with everybody else. So, but maybe they surprise us.
The only thing that I am somebody who tries to think outside the box by trade and maybe like try to find the different, a different opinion that everybody else is having. But man, like I was all in on Nemec, and now I see how much people love Slavkovsky, and I've seen the tape. I think they're turning me, Lyle. I will tell you that. I think they're turning me too.
I'll tell you, listen, I mean, I've heard some people say that, well, they're not impressed with Slavkovsky's performance, playing in the Finnish league, but listen, that kid seems to elevate his game, big game performances, and, he really turned a lot of heads at the Olympics too, so, definitely a guy to watch, and, if the Canadians take Shane Wright first overall, I think the Devils, if they don't move the second overall pick, they grab Slavkovsky.
Lyle Richardson at Spectres Hockey. Make sure you follow him. Make sure you follow all his work. Learn German so you can read his newsletter. But Lyle, thanks so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure, guys. Let's do it again sometime.
We will definitely do that. We love having Lyle Richardson on. Honestly, Spectres Hockey has been around for a while, and I've always loved Lyle's work on there. It's funny how you kind of learn about these people just from having them on and interviewing them for real quick. But the guy, I mean, the way his brain works on these deals, it's rare to see somebody who could have a mind for so many different teams. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's always a focus. His is... He could tell you about the needs of all 32 NHL teams like that. And he could, I believe that I'm a pretty fast writer myself, but I'm focusing on the Devils. I do some stuff for the fan side of Front Page. I do some football stuff, some baseball and basketball stuff. And I think I'm a pretty fast writer. But when I look at his stuff and I just look at where his brain is going and just on a dime, man, Lyle is one of the best in the biz, and you definitely, if you're not following him, I know I say this all the time about all of our guests, but I try to get you the best guests possible. And I love that, there's been a lot of people in the hockey community that have been very gracious with their time, and Lyle's somebody who's come on multiple times. Corey's somebody who's come on multiple times, but they're two people who I legitimately love their work. I'm not bringing on people here who I don't love their work. I'm not saying that I'm a stamp of approval or anything like that, but I am saying that if they come on here, there's somebody like, I enjoy your work and I really enjoy what you've been doing. And Lyle's one of those people. If you're Lyle's Bleacher Report work is the perfect workplace fodder to just be like just getting the conversation started. The kind of stuff that gets you on Reddit, on the r/hockey, this kind of stuff that gets you in your Facebook groups or your Twitter page or whatever it is. And I love it. I love everything that he's been doing. I can't wait to read that mock draft to kind of see his explanation for Slafkovsky and kind of where he's going with that. And then, I got Sam texting me, Logan Cooley or bust. Sam, I think that is the one that is absolutely not happening. I have a couple people who've talked to me about where the Devils' mind is at, and it looks like that they haven't made up their mind yet. I think that's partially due because they don't know if they're going to trade the pick or not. But Cooley is not on their radar. I think they see him as a center. And not a center as in because I know the Devils were one of two teams that asked Slafkovsky at the Combine if he could play center. But I think that's just a general Combine question. I think that they want a winger or they want a defenseman, since there are two players that are of immense caliber at those two positions in this draft. I keep going back and forth. Man, I know the other day I tweeted out, I think that they're going to trade the pick. There's too much smoke. Today, I think they're keeping the pick. I think they're going to end up trading for, I think it's going to be Fiala. I know I said I don't think they have the pieces that work, but I really don't think Minnesota has a partner here. They don't have a dance partner here. And I think that they're going to figure that out right before the draft. I think they're going to wait until draft night. And I think my bold prediction, actually, you know what? I'm going to write a bold predictions piece for the offseason. I'm going to do that next week. Next week, you're going to get a bold predictions for the offseason piece. But I'll give you one right now. Kevin Fiala is a New Jersey Devil on day 2 of the draft. The Wild are going to wait, and they're going to wait, and they're going to wait on day 1. They're going to call the teams with late first-round picks out of desperation because they didn't consider them at first. But when they realized they're not getting the numbers that they thought they were going to get. They thought they could get the 7th overall from Ottawa. Don't think that's happening. They probably thought they could get one of these middle-round picks, maybe from Pittsburgh, maybe from the Islanders. The Islanders are an interesting team there. Don't think it's happening. So they're going to call the Devils, say, we're ready to do business. They're going to ask for Holt and Mercer, and they're going to get laughed at. They're going to be like, okay, here's my realistic offer. 2nd-round pick, Fabian Zetterlund, Ty Smith, and I think they're going to do something like Graham Clark. They're going to go high upside. They're going to go cheap talent. They're going to go 2 players who could be on the NHL team right now for a minimum wage, and another player who could possibly get there, and that 2nd-round pick, so they have a little control over the player. There's going to be some good players that fall into the 2nd round this year too. So that's my prediction. I think we're going to get Kevin Fiala for parts, and some of them are good parts. I like Zetterlund. I don't want to lose them. Maybe you could convince them to take Nolan Foote over Zetterlund. I like Nolan Foote too. I think he's going to break out over the summer. If he does the things that he's supposed to do, I think he's going to break out over the summer. He's seen his brother Cal kind of go on his runs for the Stanley Cup, and he sees himself struggling to make it to the NHL. I always thought that Nolan Foote's progression took him this long. He's a guy I thought the Devils could get him in the 2nd round, but it is what it is. The Devils got him now. I still like him. He had kind of a rough season at times last year. At times he looked really good. Sometimes that means breakout next year. And maybe he makes the NHL roster. I think he's a guy who can play in that bottom 6 and eventually work his way into the top 6 in a couple of years. But Zetterlund is a guy who brings size and strength to the lineup as well. There's a lot of factors here, but the positive for the Devils is they have a lot of prospects. Just the sheer volume of prospects that they have, you could kind of fit into the needs of what the other team wants. And Bill Guerin obviously has a history with the Devils, so that's definitely something. It's definitely something to watch. But that is my bold prediction that I'm going to give. Lyle gave us a spoiler. I love the spoiler. I'm still going to share his mock draft everywhere. Give everybody a chance to get some extra eyes on that. But I'm excited for this offseason. I'm a little bit tentative. I'll be honest. I got 2 minutes. So I'm going to do a 2-minute rant. I'm tentative about this offseason because I think the Devils are going to make bold moves again, and I think I'm going to get excited again, and I kind of don't want to. I was excited last year going into the season, and this season was dreadful. I was excited 2 years ago when the Devils got Nikita Gusev and PK Subban and all that, and that season was dreadful. Last year, the season was pretty dreadful. They weren't good. But at least you had a couple things to kind of hang your hat on. I don't. I am not Michael Scott. I am not ready to get hurt again. So I feel like every move they're going to make, I'm be like, let's see it on the ice. Maybe that's good, and maybe that's good from a writer standpoint. Maybe that's good from an analyst standpoint, from a podcaster standpoint. Maybe it's good that I'm tentative. Maybe I'm not jumping on the bandwagon. Maybe that's a positive sign. But the fact that I don't even want it to happen is not great. This team has done us all dirty. And before we take them back, we should ask, what are you going to do for us? And I don't think it's Tom Fitzgerald's fault. I don't even think it's the owner's fault. What I will say is the owners need to do some upgrades to that arena. You can't have bad food options when before the pandemic you were giving us, beer specially made for Devils fans and really good food options. You got to get back to that. You got to work with. There's so many great local New Jersey foods and New Jersey beers, and oh my goodness, there's so much to do. There's so much experiences you can make at the Prudential Center. They got to get back to that. Give me a good, positive experience at the Prudential Center, and then we're great with the owners. That's my big gripe with the owners. It's not the roster or the losing. I think they listened to a lot of people who didn't know what they were talking about. But you look at the Devils. There's a real value in being good in the Metropolitan Division. That is what you should learn from the Rangers' run to the Eastern Conference Finals, is that the Metropolitan Division can be had. Everyone, folks, thanks for joining us on the Let's Go Devils podcast. State of the Fan Address. We went early, 7 to 8. It's been a lot of fun. I want to thank Lyle Richardson and Corey Schneider for coming on the podcast. You could download this at midnight when Sam edits it. Everyone go. The Stanley Cup Final starts in just a few minutes. Sonia Bryson Kirksey is going to sing the national anthem. Nope, I lied. We're in Colorado. I lied. Don't listen to me. I don't know what I'm talking about. But everybody have a great time watching the Stanley Cup Final. We'll be on again live on Wednesday, next Wednesday, and I'm assuming Sunday as well. The Let's Go Devils podcast does not take an off season. Thanks for sticking with us. Everyone have a great night, and let's go Devils.